And here we go. Aloha kakeaka, Hawaii. This is Pokalai Nui, and you are listening to Hawaiian Potpourri. I'm at the top of the Chinese Cultural Plaza here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Boy, last night was a very hot evening, or a very muggy evening. You may take it the wrong way. Language today has so many innuendos, but in the studio it was very warm and humidity being very high. Okay, sometimes it's good to be specific, isn't it? I am Pokalai Nui, and we are produced by the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. The opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of this radio station or of the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. Okay, here we go. Last night we talked about a number of things. One, I read an article about spirituality and a different expression, I guess, of spirituality. Events that occurred in Japan, or an experience that occurred in Japan with a volunteer from Vietnam writing home with regards to looking at another people and the culture or the spirituality that comes from this other people, one that produces a 9-year-old boy who has such maturity in being aware of sharing and caring and things like that. We also spoke about Helsinki in Finland, the capital of Finland, having taken a position that they would not do any business with businesses that invest or hide their funds in tax havens. And I thought that was an excellent formulation for what the city and county of Honolulu, in fact the state of Hawaii, should or could undertake, refusing to contract with organizations or agencies or businesses that hide their assets in these tax haven places, which essentially deprive the society of needed social benefits, and by others also pitching in and joining in this common boycott against such organizations, then perhaps you can get more appropriate funds or supported funds in the society to support the cost of the society. It would have, I think, large implications with regards to contractors who will be bidding for or who have bid for rail or other major capital improvement projects. And we have often had to deal with those multinational corporations that do hide their assets, such as Bain Capital, hiding their assets in places such as Cayman Islands. And although the federal tax law allows such hiding of assets or avoidance of tax payments as a matter of public policy, people are speaking up and saying that this is simply not good and refusing to deal with such organizations. So I think we're learning from Helsinki on how, or a way of combating that kind of capitalist behavior. We also spoke about Nicaragua and Daniel Ortega taking the position that they would not participate in what had been formerly known as the School of the Americas. And they had a switch in the name, but the operation of the school continued to operate out of Fort Bennings, Georgia, where the CIA essentially trained terrorists to sneak back into their countries and create upheavals in their countries or in other countries. It, in essence, is a terrorist training camp, this time state-supported terrorist activity, state-supported by the United States of America through its terrorist organization, the CIA. And so Daniel Ortega has announced that Nicaragua will not be condoning or participating in those activities, along with, I think there's 4 other countries. His is the first from Central America. The other 4 all come from South America. And they have been subjects of the terroristic activities based on the training of these folks in this terrorist school. Many people didn't fully appreciate or understand or realize that this kind of stuff was going on in the United States, and somehow they first of all, they didn't realize that there were such schools being sponsored by the CIA, or that the CIA itself was involved in such training. But for many others that have been known for the last 15 to 20 years, if not more, that these training sites continue. We also spoke about the Hawaii's or the Honolulu City Council giving its commendation, sort of an award to Ms. Kalei Kini for her tenacity in pursuing the legal system to address the integrity of the EV, or bones buried in our lands. And by that, she was saying that you cannot begin any construction project until this matter has been resolved. You have done your exploration, you have determined how you're going to take care of the removal of the EV, if it is to be removed. All of that should be done before any construction begins. And she was essentially talking about the rail construction. She eventually, or through that case, the rail has been stopped temporarily, some people say. Other people are now saying that it's a foregone conclusion that the rail will not continue. From the Ben Cayetano side, who is running the mayoral candidate, people on his side is saying it's not going to continue because after he gets elected, he's going to put a stop to rail. Other people on the Caldwell camp saying no, it will continue. It's just a temporary delay, which is costing the city millions of dollars because of the delay. But there's not much of an outcry blaming the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation or Ms. Kalei Kini for this delay. And I don't think they want to raise that outcry, because it was really the city who caused the cost to skyrocket, because the city decided to circumvent the existing law, and they did, and they got their hands slapped by the Supreme Court. In the same way that the Super Ferry supporters also got their hands slapped, not because the Super Ferry was bad, and in this case not because the rail is bad, but for these people who become so caught up with pushing a particular project that they ignore the laws. And just as private parties would also get their hands slapped, governments are being slapped down for the same thing. Let us not forget that Kauai Hau Church is also being stopped from their continued progression because they are discovering more bones than they had anticipated. I think in the Kauai Hau case, it was slightly different in that they did get the approval after doing the exploratory survey of the number of bones that would be removed and the methods by which they would be removed. And so they got the approval to go ahead, and as you come across these bones, you dispose of it appropriately. However, what is being found is that there are much more remains than they had anticipated, and based on that, it appears that the court taking a look at that, and also taking a look at the recent Supreme Court decision, the appellate court has decided to put a hold on the Kauai Hau construction until the digging has been completed, and there's a better determination as to how many EV are left in the ground and what is the appropriate disposition of the EV, or whether or not the construction should move ahead. And then we also talked about generally politics, who's running for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and some of these other contests. So that's the events that occurred last night. And if you would like to call on any of those matters, you can give me a call and we'll put you on the radio and see what you have to say about the program last night. This morning, there's not much in the news, or not much that I found of interest in the news. There's a advertisement, one of the political ads this time from candidate Caldwell, demeaning, or not demeaning, but criticizing the Cayetano rail alternative. And so it appears in the Star Advertiser. And what Caldwell does is, his campaign at least, it breaks down the Cayetano transit plan to say why he is against that transit plan. He says first that it costs more than the stated $1.1 billion that Cayetano says it will cost. And the way he looks at it, the way Caldwell looks at it, is that the real price tag will be $2 to $3 billion, and that is because you need to add the construction already completed for rail, and the penalties and legal fees or legal expenses of stopping rail, and that will cost $1 to $2 billion. So very interestingly, he's loading all of those costs onto the Cayetano plan. I don't know if that's appropriate mathematics, but anyway, that's his view. So he's dumping that on Cayetano's program. He says, plus the loss of federal transit funding, or $1.55 billion. So the loss of the federal funding, he's loading that as a cost to the Cayetano plan. He says Ben's plan could cost Honolulu taxpayer more than rail transit while delivering much, much less. I don't think his math is appropriate. I don't think his formula is appropriate. Yes, indeed, it'll cost. And it's just like you cannot blame Kalei for the millions of dollars in delayed cost as a result of the city's failure to do its appropriate due diligence, I guess some would call it, to make sure that you touched all the bases first before you can count your score as reaching home plate. It was the city's fault, not Ms. Kalei fault. In the same way, to tag Ben's plan because of the penalties and the loss of funds the city will pay because of the shoddy work done by the city, I don't think it's fair to do so, and then to say that it's a cost to be loaded on Ben's plan. It carries far fewer passengers. It says Ben's buses, 75 passengers each, will depart every 15 minutes during peak hours. Rail trains, that's 400 passengers each, will depart every 3 minutes during peak hours. In all, his buses will carry only 4 to 5% as many passengers as rail. Again, I'm not sure if his mathematics is accurate. I don't know how many buses will be put in operation and moving and serving much larger areas of the community. And if the one rail train gets stuck for some miss or malfunction, then as far as I can see, all the rail stops, in at least going in one direction, because you can't overtake or sideline a rail car. And so the delays may in fact be more. Anyway, it's interesting to see how he's trying to attack the plan. And I think his attack is not well planned out. The mathematics and the logic in it doesn't fit, at least my understanding of it. You may be able to see the criticism at page A11 of this Morning Star Advertiser. Other than that, I didn't find anything else of much interest or news in the Star Advertiser. It starts out with Board of Regents now asking the question, what is the future of the University of Hawaii leader or President Greenwood, and whether or not they will continue with her contract, they will discharge her, or what have you. And that is a decision that will go before the Board of Regents. They have been focused on by the legislature as not doing their job and not overseeing the operations of the university. And so I think it's going to come down to a question of what is the role of the Board of Regents. And we don't know how high this will climb. I think it'll stop at the Board of Regents because it is, or the University of Hawaii is a constitutionally established entity within the state of Hawaii. And so you don't have that kind of continuing oversight by the state legislature because it's supposed to be a semi-autonomous entity or an autonomous entity outside of the purview of the state legislature except for funding purposes, very similar to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, where the people appointed or the people selected as trustees are not through an appointment approved by the legislature but through election. So that body is supposed to be autonomous from the state legislature. It's the same with the University of Hawaii. I think the question, though, is whether or not the Board of Regents themselves should be cited for their lack of continuing or appropriate oversight over the president. And that, as I said previously, is really a policy decision. To what extent are boards supposed to be engaged in the day-to-day affairs, or should that be left to your staff? And if you hire a person to be chief executive officer or executive director or president to head an institution, and you sit on the Board of Regents or the Board of Directors, to what extent do you get involved in the daily activities, or are you only involved in establishing policies? And generally the organizations that I have created or that I work with, we normally set aside the Board of Directors as being aside from and only to oversee policy and general review of the entity or the agency. Now you have some more active boards where you have the chairman of the board is also the president of the organization running the staff and the rest, while other board members may be just consultants or advisory to the decisions being made. In that case, I would expect that the board would be a little bit more active than your advisory board. So different organizations have their different setups on how they establish themselves, and it seems to me that maybe there's some lack of clarity at the university. I don't know. You may have an opinion on that. Our telephone number here is 524-1080, and if you would like to chime in on any of those matters, give me a call. We'll put you on the radio and see what you have to say about those matters. Now let's see what else I have before me, and I'll just go ahead and share with you some of the materials in front of me, unless we receive a telephone call. You remember that article that I spoke about earlier, the one on spirituality? And the Vietnamese immigrant working in Fukushima as a policeman who writes back to Vietnam about the incident that he comes across a young lad of 9 years old. He says that it'll take some time before you get to the front of the line to collect any supply of food. So what I'm going to do is give you my food because I'm concerned about you. So the boy takes the food, takes it up to the front of the line, deposits it there, and then comes back to stand in his place in back of the line. And the Vietnamese policeman is surprised, and he asks, why didn't you eat the food instead of adding it to the food pile? And this 9-year-old says, because I see a lot more people hungrier than I am. If I put it there, then they will distribute the food equally. And so he asked, a society that can produce a 9-year-old who understands the concept of sacrifice for the greater good must be a great society, a great people. Along with that article came lesson to learn. 10 points: a calm, not a single visual of chest beating or wild grief. Sorrow itself has been elevated. This is his observation of the Japanese society in this area that had suffered the both the earthquake and the nuclear breakdown. This is in Fukushima. He says the dignity, disciplined quays for water and groceries, not a rough word or a crude gesture. The ability, the incredible architects, for instance, buildings swayed but didn't fall. The grace. People bought only what they needed for the present, so everybody could get something. The order. No looting in shops, no honking, and no overtaking on the roads. Just understanding. The sacrifice. 50 workers stayed back to pump seawater in the nuclear reactors. How will they ever be repaid? The tenderness. Restaurants cut prices. An unguarded ATM is left alone. The strong cared for the weak. The training. The old and the children, everyone knew exactly what to do. And they did just that. The media, they showed magnificent restraint in the bulletins. No silly reporters, only calm reportage. The conscience. When the power went off in a store, people put things back on the shelves and left quietly. These are the observations of this Vietnamese policeman working in Fukushima and sharing his observations to a friend back in Vietnam, commenting on the social order that was occurring during this period in Fukushima, Japan. Think about it. Think about how we ourselves would match up to such tragedies, and at least it sets sort of a goal for us. Let's go to some music.
Kaulana pua o Hawaii, kupa ama hope o ka aina, iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino, pala pala anunu me ka paka. Mane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, koku ana honoa o Pilani, ka ko kaua I o mano Pa'apu me ke oni o ka puhi hewa Aolea e kau I ka pulima Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi O o hui ai nā ku ai hewa I ka pono sibila a o ke kanaka Aole makoa e mina mina I ka pu'u kala o ke au puni Ua lava mako I ka pohaku I ka ai ka maha o